Sanders is out here defending Joe Biden. He had an interview recently with Chris Wallace. Now, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I think Chris Wallace actually did a good job with the questions that he asked him. I don't agree with everything that Chris Wallace said, but I want you to hear some of these responses from Bernie Sanders, and then we're going to connect this to the issue of Joe Biden running again in 2024 and some missed opportunities alongside something that happened last night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner that I think should give you pause. And I think we all need to be paying attention to. So let's get into this discussion here with Chris Wallace and Bernie Sanders.
President Biden announced this week that he's running for re-election, and you have already endorsed him. Why is it that not a single leading Democrat is willing to contest that nomination in the primaries? Why do you think that is?
I suspect it has to do with a real fear of the growth of right-wing extremism in this country.
So the question that he's asking Bernie Sanders is basically, long story short, why is it that none of the other Democrats that are there in office are disagreeing with this run, this re-election run of Joe Biden for 2024? Bernie Sanders' response is, well, it's because of the fear of the right-wing extremism. I don't believe that to be true. I do not believe that to be true. But let me let him finish.
And that is the Republican Party over the last number of years, accelerated by Trumpism, has become not a conservative party, but a right-wing extremist party. And this is a party that, not all by any means, but you have many of the leaders who actually don't believe in democracy anymore. You have many Republicans maintaining the lie that Trump actually won the election. You have Republicans working overtime to deny low-income people, people of color, young people, the right to vote, people who defended the insurrection in January 6th. So the first answer to your question, Chris, is that I think there's a great fear in this country about attacks on democracy. We want to maintain
So
democracy.
you're saying it's more.
So let's talk about this for just a second. Great fear about attacks on democracy. But when they say democracy, what type of democracy are they referring to? So, for example, I told you we don't have real democracy. If we did, third party and independent candidates would easily get on the ballot. They wouldn't have to go through these hurdles to try to fight just to get on the ballot, right? If we had real democracy, RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson would be able to debate Joe Biden, which right now we have a DNC that says that's not even going to happen. We don't have real democracy. What we have are corporations who pick who they think should be the person. They bankroll that candidate, and that is usually the candidate that gets pushed through, the candidate that has the most money. So that's what you need to pay attention to. Who do the donors get behind? Who has the most money? That's usually the one that'll make their way through, in reference to the Democratic Party. Now, Bernie Sanders is saying he believes they're not speaking up or contesting this re-election run by Joe Biden because they're afraid that we may end up with a Trump again, a Trump-like figure again. I don't believe that. I believe the reason why those politicians in DC and the Democratic Party are not contesting Joe Biden's presidential run for 2024 is because they want to make sure that they keep their seat. Because they know that if they try to push back against this, especially at this particular time, and we all know Joe Biden is not doing well. We all know this. They know that they could end up like Dennis Kucinich, where the Democratic Party could come in and they could redraw their district so that they don't have a district, just like they did to Dennis. They're afraid that would happen, that they would get pushed out, that they would get primary challenged. Their own party would put up a candidate to run against them to push them out. That's why they've already been told, if you want to stay here, you got to play the game. And right now, the game says we all got to get behind Joe Biden. And that's why even when it comes to the regressives, I told you we don't call them progressives anymore. Even when it comes to the regressives, that's why they're not willing to say, nope, sorry, there are people running on progressive issues against Joe Biden, so I'm going to endorse them. That's why they're not willing to do it. So Bernie's not going to tell you that because Bernie want to keep his seat too.
Or fear of Donald Trump and MAGA than it is enthusiasm for Joe Biden?
Well, I think that's half of it. But the other half is a recognition, I think, that, while Biden has not done everything I would like to have seen him done. Let's talk about what he has accomplished, which is no small thing. We forget, as Americans, we have short memory spans.
Now it's our fault. See, now we don't remember. These are the kind of things I like to point out. Look at what Bernie Sanders is doing here, right? So Ro and Pramila Jayapal, when they have these interviews, they tell people we just have to tell the story better. We have to change the messaging. They sit back as if they really believe that the American people forgot. Here's Bernie Sanders telling you we have short memories. No, my memory's fine. I remember what has been done, and I remember what has not been done. And I know what my bank account looks like. And I know how much groceries cost in the grocery store right now. So it's not that we don't remember. We remember. We just know it just wasn't enough. Now they got Bernie Sanders doing that same talking point.
The American Rescue Plan, which, as you recall, made sure that every working family in the country had $1,400 for husband, wife, and kids. We got money to hospitals. We extended unemployment benefits. Bottom line is that colossal piece of legislation, which I helped work on, helped pull this country out of that economic downturn faster, I think, than in any time in American history when we faced similar economic crises. That's a big deal.
You say that Joe Biden is a more progressive president than he was a U.S. senator, and you take some credit, along with other progressives, in pushing him more to the left. What is it that you think he's done that shows him being more progressive than he was as a senator?
I think
where did he move?
Well, first of all, I think what Biden, it's not that I pushed him or others pushed him. He ran an election for president, and he saw millions of people saying, hey, you know what? We want structural changes in this country. We're tired with little half measures. The country is in trouble. Let's have the courage to take on big money. He saw that. His staff saw that and said, okay.
Yeah, he saw that, Bernie, but he didn't uphold those things. Let me ask you a question. Where is the student loan debt cancellation? He messed that up. We explained to you how he didn't follow the right procedure in order to get that done so it wouldn't get held up in the courts. There was that. Where is the student loan debt cancellation for the students that went to HBCUs, which he said that he would cancel all of their debt if they made under $125,000 a year? Where is that? Where is that? Where's the $15 minimum wage? Where's the increase for the teachers? We remember what Joe Biden ran on. We also are able to see that these things have not been accomplished. These are some of these things he could have done by executive order, right? Codifying Roe v. Wade. The number of years and election cycles that the Democratic Party as a whole has slept on that is a slap in the face. It is absolutely disgusting. This could have happened under Obama on day one, which is what he promised. And then he changed his mind. So when you point out these issues and you say, well, why are these things happening? Again, it's the money. Bernie Sanders is not fooling me. Bernie Sanders has been a politician longer than I've been alive, if I remember correctly. So Bernie Sanders knows exactly how the game is played. He knows that these politicians and both of these parties are controlled by Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. Big money controls the parties, the people in the parties, and it controls the decision-making that happens in DC. That's why I told you this before. Typically, the legislation that is passed has some type of corporate interest. The climate legislation that they were cheering about, which I'm going to show you something about that in just a second, that had corporate interests attached to it. That's why Joe Manchin approved it. That's why he signed off on it and said, yes, I support it. But Bernie knows that. But Bernie Sanders has already been spoken to. You see, he was already spoken to before he ran in 2020. He was spoken to before he ran in 2016. He know the drill. He knows at the end of the day, when he loses, he's going to have to back the corporate Democrat that he told you to vote against and to vote against all the corporate money and the billionaires and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, he's still going to back those people, even though he told you not to back that type of interest. That's how Bernie gets to keep his seat. So the Democratic Party, the DNC goes, yeah, Bernie, let's let Bernie go do his little political movement thing. Let's go do it. I don't think they expected it to get as big as it was. See, that's the thing. Let's let him go do that and da-da-da. And then at the end, you let him go do that, rile up the young people, and then they'll come right back to the Democratic Party anyway. And let him go have some fun and go do that over there. But the idea was never to allow Bernie Sanders to get any type of power. That's why Bernie still has his seat, because he knows how to play that game. The people who did not know how to play the game or didn't want to play that game are gone.
So the ARPA program, to my mind, the American Rescue Plan, was enormously significant. We passed the largest infrastructure bill in modern American history. It put a whole lot of people to work doing meaningful, important work. We finally, in a small way, in the Inflation Reduction Act, made, we got to do a lot more, taking on the pharmaceutical industry and beginning to lower prescription drug costs. So those are not small things.
But Senator, as Joe Biden gears up for 2024, he's done a number of things that seem to move back towards the center or even to the right. He's approved a massive drilling program in Alaska. He's cracking down on immigration. He opposes criminal justice reform in Washington, D.C.
I think the media has...
What's going on?
Well, I don't know what's going on. I think I truly disagree with him in terms of that Willow Project in Alaska. Absolutely.
Bernie Sanders knows. This is Chris Wallace letting you know, even he sees that Joe Biden has gone to the right on some of these issues, as particularly this climate issue. He's letting you know that even he sees that. Okay. Bernie's response, this is not truthful.
He's done a number of things that seem to move back towards the center or even to the right. He's approved a massive drilling program in Alaska. He's cracking down on immigration. He opposes criminal justice reform in Washington, D.C.
I think the media has...
What's going on?
Well, I don't know what's going on. I think...
He knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on. You know exactly what's going on. You know, again, that he's controlled by corporate interest. That is why he's making the decisions that he's making. How are you going to pass a climate legislation and then we're not even a year later and you're already planning to drill somewhere else? The Willow Project. Not even a year later after that climate legislation's passed. Now, why would he do that? I don't know. Maybe some of these companies, some of these oil companies, maybe they have lobbyists in DC. And those lobbyists are pushing these things to happen. We'll let you go ahead and have your climate legislation so you please the young people and they think you're doing something right. But at the same time, we need you to go do this drilling project here off of Alaska, the Willow Project. We need you to do that too. You can't serve. This is going to sound very funny because my grandma used to say this. My grandma was very religious, but this is in a different context. But I'm going to say it. You can't serve two masters. You can't sit here, Joe Biden, and say that you are going to serve the working people, especially the young people who will be impacted the most by climate change. So will African-American communities will be impacted the most by climate change. Lower income communities, poor communities will be impacted the most by climate change. And you can't sit here and say you're serving the working class people, and then at the same time, you are serving corporate interests as well. That's the problem. Bernie Sanders knows this. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You know that these parties are controlled by corporate. You know that. You know they're controlled by the military-industrial complex. This is a bad faith response. Bad faith.
I truly disagree with him in terms of that Willow Project in Alaska. Absolutely. You cannot say, as he does, that climate change is the existential threat to this planet, which it is, and then approve massive oil exploration.
So is he trying?
And you can't say that either Bernie and yet sit up there and say you're still going to do everything you can in your power to make sure that Joe Biden's reelected, and he's the one who's doing this project. He's the one that approved of it. So if you feel that way, that climate is this existential threat to the American, well, to the world actually, but you still sitting up here willing to support the person who's continuing those actions, you can't sit on both sides either. Like, it's just, I don't understand this at all. It's almost like someone said something to Bernie and was just like, no, you can't, don't mention these things.
You think he's
I don't want to
move?
put, he has his reason. I don't know why. All I can tell you is I strongly oppose that.
Let me bring you onto another subject, which is age. The president is 80, you're 81, and according to the polls, most Democrats do not want to see him run again, and most of them, it's because of the issue of age. Is that a legitimate concern, given the fact that the president would be 86 years old at the end of a second term?
Before he responds, I want to correct something here about age, because mainstream media keeps saying that it's about age. It's not his age. It is cognitive decline. So when you have people answer this poll question about Joe Biden, in the back of my mind, I'm not thinking, oh, is he too old because of the number of his age? I'm thinking based on what I've seen from his behavior and his actions, him walking away from the podium, kind of wandering around, him forgetting who the prime minister is and going to the wrong person, him saying words that don't make sense, not being able to string sentences together unless they pump him up in some kind of way or shape or form. I am seeing cognitive decline. So the average American, when they're answering that question, that's probably what they're thinking about, not so much his number, because they knew his number when they voted for him for 2020, but the cognitive decline that is very obvious to the American people that Joe Biden is experiencing at this shape and time. And notice, Chris Wallace doesn't phrase it that way. Bernie won't phrase it that way. Most mainstream media won't say the words cognitive decline. And I'm pretty sure they've already been informed by the State Department not to say those words.
Obviously, I have a conflict of influence here. I think we should only elect old people. Look, I think it totally depends on the individual. I'm sure people in their 80s and 90s who are sharp as a tack, and people who are 50, maybe not so much. It depends on the individual. Is age a factor? Yeah. Is it the only factor? Obviously
But you
not.
agree it is a factor.
It's a factor, but it depends on the individual. Of course it's a factor.
But you often don't know about the individual. In other words, somebody is 80 years old, he's doing fine, maybe not so great at 82 or 86.
That's a fair point.
Governor Nikki Haley, who's running for the Republican nomination for president, said that she thinks that anybody over the age of 75 who wants to run for president should have to take a mental competency test. When you went after her and accused her...
I didn't go after. I was asked the question. I think it's an absurd idea.
Okay, and you accused her of ageism.
Yeah.
She fired back. Take a look.
We have to have mental competency tests for everyone over the age of 75. That's not personal. We've got seniors who can do many things. The reason why I'm saying that we need that is you should have transparency. Government's supposed to work for the people, not the other way around. Bernie Sanders lost his mind because I asked for that. He's exactly the reason we need it.
Lost my mind.
I have to say, you were growling as you were listening to that soundbite.
I don't think I quite lost my mind. Somebody asked me a question. I think what she said, look, think back. Nikki Haley is a former governor and a woman. How many years ago did people say, well, women can't be presidents? What happens if there's an attack during their period? Remember that? Women are just emotionally incapable. They're too emotional. That's the crap that we heard 40 or 50 years ago. So, no, I didn't quite lose my mind because she made that statement. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's a dumb statement. And obviously, I don't support it.
But Senator, there is a difference.
No, I'm sorry. You have to be able to make rational, coherent decisions. Like, you have to be able to do that. Listen, Ronald Reagan apparently was experiencing some of this towards the end of his presidency as well. And it's just, Listen, you got your finger on the trigger there. This is the president of the United States. This is a person that can make foreign policy decisions on their own and not necessarily need the approval of Congress to do so. You need to have that type of mental capacity to be able to make serious, life-changing world decisions. And I'm sorry, like some people may look at that and say, that's not fair, Sabby. You are running the country. You're putting millions of people's lives like in jeopardy. This is not a job at Burger King. You are not phone banking for people. You are not answering the telephones and, asking people, do you like your cable service? This is not that kind of job. And I think Bernie's being way too nice. Way too nice. He never brings up, and Bree pointed this out. I'll see if I can find it. He never brings up this issue that happened with the DNC fraud lawsuit. Nico House was the one not too long ago. We talked about that. He never brings up this issue. Why did he not bring this up? Why not? We'll go on a little bit here.
There's nothing inherent about the color of your skin or your gender. Let me just finish. Nothing inherent about those that raises serious questions about your competence. And an age by itself, a number, doesn't either. But candidates routinely share their medical tests.
Yeah.
Public health scientists say that it is common for seniors to experience some decline. Not all, but it's a real thing. So why is it so outrageous, the idea that somebody who's 80 years old and is going to run for president, that he should have to share a cognitive test?
Look, all that I'm saying, it is in our country, theoretically, it is the people who make a decision. If you think that President Biden is too old and you can't vote for him, fine, that's your view. I would suggest you look at the totality of the person. Take a look at the job that he or she does and make a decision.
Wouldn't it be good to have
the job? He's running the country. I don't know what else to call it.
more information in making that judgment?
I don't think you go around giving cognitive tests to all the candidates and just starting at people at 75. No.
All right. House
Now, why is this important? There's more that I need to show you as well. He was also on CNN, and Bernie's basically making these rounds. Again, I feel like trying to protect Joe Biden at all costs because they know that Joe Biden is not doing well.
Senator President Biden announced his campaign officially for re-election this week. He would be 86 years old by the end of his second term. You're 1 year older than President Biden. Is his age something that voters should consider in 2024?
Well, I think when you look at a candidate, you consider a lot. I think age is one thing. I think experience is another thing. I think your record that you have established is another thing. But to my mind, Donna, when you put it all together, what you have to look at is what does the candidate stand for? Which side are they on?
But what you stand for and what you do are two different things. Just because a candidate says they stand for something doesn't mean that once they're in office, they're actually going to try to implement policies to make those issues become a reality. And that's something that we've seen happen with a number of politicians, right? Joe Biden ran on a lot of things, and these things have not been accomplished. This is just ridiculous. I really think that Bernie Sanders at some point should issue a public apology to all the people who canvassed for him, phone bank for him, all the working class people who gave him $27 when they didn't have that money to really give to him. I really think he owes working class people in this country a big apology. Let's go back in and we'll finish up this video, and I have the climate one to show you.
Are they on the side of the billionaire class, or are they on the side of working people? Look, it is no great secret I ran against Biden. No great secret that he and I have strong differences of opinion. But when we live in a nation where you have a major political party, the Republican Party, where many, not all, but many of their leadership doesn't even believe in democracy. They maintain the myth that Trump won the last election. They're trying to keep people from voting. They're trying to deny women the right to control their own bodies. So that's a whole issue out there. If you believe in democracy, you want to see more people vote, not fewer people vote, I think the choice is pretty clear, and that choice is Biden. And second of all, what I do believe is the Democrats.
We don't have true democracy in this country. See, to him, it's just we want more people to vote. We don't have true democracy in this country. And Bernie Sanders knows that. If we had true democracy, there wouldn't have been a DNC fraud lawsuit. There wouldn't have been one. If we had true democracy, we would not have super delegates. If we had true democracy, the super delegates wouldn't have chosen to give states like West Virginia to Hillary Clinton, even though Bernie Sanders won every single county in that state. We do not have true democracy, and Bernie Sanders knows that from personal experience. That's what's so frustrating.
And the president have got to be stronger on working class issues. They've got to make it clear that we believe in a government that represents all, not just the few. Take on the greed of the insurance companies, the drug companies, Wall Street, all the big money interests, and start delivering for working class people. You do that, I think Biden is going to win in a landslide.
But Bernie Sanders is repeating the same rhetoric that he said for the past 2 election cycles, get rid of the greed of Wall Street and all that. And he knows those things are not going to happen because they control and own the party. When we talk about some of the issues with Joe Biden's candidacy, we got to talk about Biden having a cheat sheet that shows he had advanced knowledge of journalist questions. I'm not going to read this entire article, but these are some of the things that are happening. A cheat sheet held by President Biden during a Wednesday press conference revealed that the 80-year-old commander-in-chief had advanced knowledge of a question from a journalist. So here's a picture here. You see this? LA Times, Courtney Sabramian, question 1. So you can see it right there, like in his hand. This is what I was trying to tell you. They're running cover for Joe Biden. They've been prepping him. Look, press conference prep Wednesday, April 26th, you, and then all the people that are listed there. So it seems like, and I've read this whole article, I just don't have time to read the whole thing now, but it seems like it's very clear that in some of these public appearances, they have been giving Joe Biden questions ahead of time. This is why I said before about the cognitive decline. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. And when we want to talk about, we can go to the part 2, Corey, when you're ready, to the second part of the videos. When you want to talk about the record, this so-called record that Joe Biden has, when they bring up the climate issue and they say we passed, this legislation is sweeping climate change, really. And then you talk about the drilling projects right outside of Texas. It's not just Alaska, right outside of Texas. And you talk about the Willow Project right outside of Alaska, which is also going to impact indigenous communities. And then you have an indigenous politician in DC who said it was okay. Everybody's bought off once they get in. Don't tell me differently, man. Everyone is bought off once they get in. I remember when she won, and it was so historic. First indigenous woman to be congresswoman, and she's willing to sell out her own people. She's willing to sell out her own people. How can you let the communities become poisoned? Her own people. Own. So last night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, there was a protest outside, a climate protest. Not one of those politicians who claim to care so much about climate change or claim to be these environmental activists, not one of them were with the protesters. You had 2 politicians show up from Tennessee, the 2 that were in the Tennessee State House. So the Tennessee 3, you guys know about them. They showed up, but the politicians in DC were not there. So we want to talk about Joe Biden's record. Where was Joe Biden during all of this? There are a couple of videos I want to show you.
Hi, folks. If you're checking for brunch, it's going to be straight down the sidewalk. Look, sir.
Do your reporting. Our planet is burning. Do your reporting. Our planet is burning. Do your reporting. Our planet is burning. Do your reporting. The 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 planet is burning. Do your reporting. Do your reporting. Do your reporting. The planet is burning. Do your reporting. The planet is burning. Do your reporting. The planet is burning. Do your reporting. Do your reporting. Do your reporting. The planet is burning. Do your reporting. The planet is burning. Do your reporting. Do your reporting. Do your
Pretty sad to see that they ignored all these young people that they told to come out and vote for Joe Biden. Pretty sad, you know, he needed those votes, right? During the midterms, you guys come out and support the Democrats so that the Republicans don't win the Senate and don't win the House, even though Republicans won the House anyway. There were many people there. Look at this. Look at all the young people that came out saying, look, Joe Biden, why are you doing this to our world? All these people. So it says Biden in fossil fuels. You know, they know what's going on. The young people aren't stupid. They realize, wait a minute now, he passed this climate legislation, but he's still trying to drill. And so this is from Kai. He said, breaking, youth climate activists are non-violently blockading the White House Correspondents' Dinner, turning away attendees and government SUVs. They are demanding President Biden keep his promise to end drilling on federal lands. Climate science demands it. We must end fossil fuels. And I'll show you some of the pictures here. And then here's another one. And here's all the people going to the dinner. They're all dressed up in their fancy little dresses. You know, these people live in another world. They really do. It's like they don't want to pay attention to what is happening around them. They don't care about these issues for the most part. They try to pander to certain communities and pretend like they care about these issues so that they can get reelected. Most of these people walking into this event right now are just there to rub elbows with people like John Legend so they can take pictures and go back home and tell their friends, look, I got to meet John and Chrissy. Most of those people don't care about anything real. They just want to go there and rub elbows with people. That's what this is about for a lot of I just feel so sorry for all these young people because they actually believed Joe Biden. They actually believed the Democratic Party. I feel so sorry for these people. And I believe I have one more to show as well. Now, this is from JB. JB pointed this out. The fact that John Legend and Chrissy Teigen walked past climate activists to support a pro-corporate, pro-pollution president tells you everything you need to know. Nothing they say regarding climate change should be taken seriously anymore. Frauds. And here's that video here.
Stand with us! Hey! I'm Nicholas Family Justice from Chicago. How you doing? Take a place, nephew. Planet is dying! Planet is dying! The planet is dying! The planet is dying!
You see people like John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, like they don't care. John Legend wrote a song called Ordinary People. He said, we're just ordinary people. They're not. He's not an ordinary person. They're rich. They're celebrities. And that's why they can just walk past the group of climate activists as if they don't matter. Because they don't really care. They're pandering to the people. So when you have people like these celebrities that say, we have to care about the environment, we have to care about the climate, pay attention. Do you ever see them at these activities when these things happen? Do they come to any of these protests? They come to any of these climate events? Do they come to any of the climate action talks or anything like that? Do they? No, they trying to walk inside. They want to rub elbows with people like Joe Biden. That's all it is about. People just want to be with other big name people and they just want to be seen just for the purpose of being seen. They don't really care about this issue. And you can see the difference between the people who are actually activists and the ones who are just trying to be seen. So when Bernie Sanders talks about Joe Biden's record and Chris Wallace asked him about the climate issue, how Joe Biden has moved further actually to the right and not to the left, I can point and say the same thing. Bernie Sanders, where were you? Where were you? Why weren't you out there with those climate activists? They're all controlled. They're all bought. They like going to their fancy dinners. They like having their fancy apartments, their multiple homes. First year Congress, you're making what, $170,000 a year? I've never made $170,000 a year. I've never made $100,000 a year. Just imagine how quickly that can go to someone's head and how quickly they say to themselves, I don't want to go back to the place that I was, especially if you're someone who came from working class or poverty like Maxwell Frost or like Cori Bush. The climate catastrophe is more important than having a dinner with Joe Biden. People are so confused. They're all over the place. Thank you for the super chat, Jonathan. Bernie lives in fear. Thank you for the super chat, Random Nobody. Bernie is such a serpent. Thank you for the super chat, 208 or 2008 B Scott. The money for student loan cancellation and everything else went to Ukraine, I guess, but I'm supposed to vote for Jim Crow Joe because fascism. Thank you for the super chat, Colin. Funny how Bernie writes a book about being okay to be angry about capitalism and endorses the guy who's in bed with it. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you for the super chat, Yep X. Joe also has been caught with cheat sheets telling him how to sit down. It's crazy, man. Like, thank you for the super chat, Dwayne. Democrats are repealing the First Amendment and rigging primaries, targeting journalists. They don't believe in democracy. No, they do not. And thank you for the super chat, Colin. Corey Rocks. And thank you, Random Nobody. They act like they're royalty going to their social club dinner. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. It couldn't be me. I couldn't just turn away. Like, I would have been outside, not inside. You know, it reminds me of the AOC Met Gala dress issue. Being inside instead of outside with the protesters.